The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a ship that appeared without warning in Earth's outer atmosphere. Dr. Emma Foster was drinking her third cup of coffee when the emergency alert screamed through her laboratory speakers. After decades of searching the stars for signs of intelligent life, the signs had finally come looking for them. The alien vessel was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at directly. Its hull seemed to shift between liquid metal and crystalline structures, defying every law of physics humanity thought they understood. When it transmitted its message in perfect English, the world held its breath. Greetings, people of Earth. The Galactic Council extends an invitation to join the greater community of civilized worlds. Your species has been observed and deemed ready for contact. Please prepare a diplomatic delegation for transport to Council Station Harmony. Ambassador Thane had been preparing for this moment his entire career, though he never truly believed it would happen. As Earth's foremost expert in theoretical xenodiplomacy, he had written countless papers on first contact protocols. Now those theories would face the ultimate test. The journey to Council Station took 3 days aboard the alien transport. The ship's interior was a marvel of engineering that seemed to adapt itself to human needs. The walls glowed with a soft, warm light that reminded Foster of sunrise, and the artificial gravity felt perfectly natural. Their escort, a being that introduced itself as Guide Venth, appeared to be made of living crystal that chimed softly when it moved. Your species is quite young, Venth explained as they traveled through space that looked more like flowing water than vacuum. Most civilizations develop faster than light travel before achieving global unity. You have accomplished the reverse, which is unusual but not unprecedented. Foster took careful notes of everything she observed. The guide's casual dismissal of humanity's achievements was telling. If this was how they treated potential allies, how did they treat their enemies? Council Station Harmony was beyond anything humanity had imagined. The structure stretched for thousands of kilometers in all directions, a city-sized construct that housed representatives from hundreds of different worlds. As their transport docked, Foster could see beings of every conceivable shape and size moving through transparent corridors. The council chamber itself was designed to accommodate the wildest variety of alien physiologies. Some delegates floated in gas-filled spheres, others rested in pools of exotic liquids, and a few appeared to be pure energy contained within force fields. The humans, walking on their own 2 legs and breathing normal air, looked almost primitive by comparison. Ambassador Thane stepped forward to address the assembly. His prepared speech about humanity's desire for peaceful cooperation was met with polite attention from some delegates and obvious boredom from others. When he finished, the real discussion began. Councillor Roth of the Vorthak spoke first. Its crystalline form chimed with harmonics that the translation system converted into condescending words. The species from Sol 3 shows promise, but their homeworld classification presents certain concerns. A Class 12 Deathworld produces survivors, not citizens. Foster felt her jaw clench at the casual dismissal. Earth was dangerous, certainly. Hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, and countless predators made survival a daily challenge. But those same challenges had forged humanity into something resilient and adaptable. The Grakani representative, an insectoid creature with multiple arms and compound eyes, clicked its mandibles in what the translator called agreement. Deathworld species often lack the temperament for civilized discourse. They solve problems through violence rather than negotiation. However, added the Nimari delegate, its gaseous form swirling within its containment sphere, they could serve useful functions. Their physical durability makes them suitable for dangerous occupations that other species cannot perform. The discussion continued for hours, with various council members debating humanity's potential value. They spoke about humans as if they were not in the room, as if they were specimens being evaluated for purchase rather than representatives of an entire civilization. When the vote was finally called, the result was predictable. Humanity would be granted observer status, which meant they could watch council proceedings but could not vote or participate in major decisions. It was a polite way of saying they were not considered equals. Captain Alex Reed had remained silent throughout the entire proceeding, but Foster could see the tension in his shoulders. As Earth's military representative, he understood the implications better than anyone. The Council saw humanity as potentially useful servants, nothing more. Their quarters in the station were comfortable but isolated, located in a section reserved for junior delegates and probationary members. As they settled in for what would be an extended stay, Foster began her real work. The xenobiology lab they provided was well equipped, ostensibly so she could study galactic species for her research. What the Council did not realize was that Foster was not just documenting alien biology for scientific curiosity. Every sample she examined, every physiological scan she performed, was being analyzed for weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Reed, meanwhile, had begun his own investigation. His official role was military liaison, but his true mission was intelligence gathering. The Council's security was impressive, but not impenetrable. They had grown comfortable in their superiority, and comfortable enemies made mistakes. Within weeks, Reed had identified critical vulnerabilities in the station's defense grid and communication systems. Foster had cataloged the biological weaknesses of a dozen major species. Most importantly, they had both reached the same conclusion. The Galactic Council was not the enlightened democracy it pretended to be. The Council maintained order through a combination of economic pressure and technological superiority. Species that stepped out of line found their trade routes disrupted or their technology mysteriously failing. It was a system built on fear, disguised as cooperation. Late one evening, as they reviewed their findings in the privacy of their shielded quarters, Foster made an observation that would change everything. They think we're harmless because we come from a dangerous world. They believe that surviving Earth makes us tough but not smart. Reed nodded grimly. They have no idea what we're capable of when we work together. They see individuals, not a species that conquered an entire planet through cooperation and planning. The irony was perfect. Humanity's greatest strength had always been their ability to adapt and overcome impossible odds. The Council, in their arrogance, had invited Earth's most dangerous predator into their home and then turned their backs on it. As the weeks passed, more human delegations arrived at the station. Scientists, engineers, trade specialists, and cultural attachés. The Council welcomed them as signs of humanity's eagerness to integrate into galactic society. They had no idea that each new arrival was another piece being placed on a game board that stretched across the entire galaxy. The quiet. Deathworlders were no longer just observing. They were planning. The distress signal reached Earth on a quiet Sunday morning, carried by an automated beacon that had been drifting through space for 6 days. The civilian transport ship New Horizon had been attacked without warning while conducting a routine survey mission in the outer colonies. 37 souls lost, including 12 children who had been traveling with their families to establish a new research station. President Torres read the report in her private office, her hands trembling. With carefully controlled rage, the attack had been brutal and unnecessary. The Gracani raiding party had disabled the ship's engines, boarded it, and methodically executed every human aboard before stripping the vessel of anything valuable. The automated distress beacon had recorded everything. Within hours, Ambassador Thane was standing before the Galactic Council, demanding justice for the murdered civilians. The response was exactly what humanity had come to expect from the galactic community. Counselor Roth's crystalline form chimed with what the translator called regret, but the sound felt hollow and meaningless. The incident is indeed unfortunate, the Vorthak representative stated. However, the sector where your ship was operating has been claimed by Greekani interest for the past century. Your people entered their territory without proper authorization. The Greekani delegate, a massive insectoid creature named War Leader Krex, clicked its mandibles in what might have been amusement. The humans should have known better than to trespass in our space. We responded as any sovereign species would, to illegal intrusion. Foster watched from the observer section as Thane presented evidence that the New Horizon had been in unclaimed space according to all galactic charts. The council members shifted uncomfortably but offered no real support. When the final vote was called, humanity received a formal expression of sympathy and a reparation payment of 50,000 galactic credits. The price of 37 human lives, according to the Galactic Council, was less than the cost of a decent starship. That evening, in the secure communications chamber of their quarters, Thane opened a channel to Earth. President Torres appeared on the screen, her face a mask of controlled fury that Reed recognized from his military days. This was the expression of a leader who had reached the end of their patience. How did they respond? Torres asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. Credits, Thane replied simply. They offered us money and told us to be more careful. In the future, the silence that followed was more terrifying than any shout of rage. Reed had seen that look before, during the resource wars when humanity had been forced to make impossible decisions for survival. It was the calm before the storm that would reshape continents. Admiral Kane, Torres said without looking away. From the camera, initiate Protocol 7. Reed felt his blood run cold. Protocol 7 was theoretical, a contingency plan that existed only in classified files and the nightmares of military planners. It was what humanity would do if the galaxy proved to be hostile and diplomacy failed. The fact that Torres was implementing it meant that Earth's leadership had reached a unanimous decision. Humanity was done being polite. Within days, the first signs appeared across the galaxy, though nobody recognized them for what they were. A Greekani supply depot suffered a catastrophic failure in its automated systems, resulting in the loss of exactly 37 combat suits. The incident was attributed to outdated software and poor maintenance. On the Vorthak homeworld, a resonance cascade in their primary crystal gardens caused structural damage to several buildings. Investigation revealed that someone had introduced specific harmonic frequencies into the planet's communication network, but the source remained untraceable. Foster smiled as she read the reports in her laboratory. The Vorthak had no idea that their own crystalline physiology made them vulnerable to acoustic manipulation. Dr. Sarah Kim, one of the new human researchers who had arrived the previous month, had spent weeks studying Vorthak biology under the guise of cultural exchange. Now that research was bearing fruit in ways the Council never expected. Captain Reed was equally busy, though his activities were far more subtle. The maintenance teams throughout Council Station had welcomed the helpful human engineer who volunteered for extra shifts and always seemed eager to learn about alien technology. They had no way of knowing that every system he touched was being quietly modified with nearly undetectable hardware additions. The genius of the human approach was its patience. Each incident was carefully spaced and made to appear unrelated. System failures, industrial accidents, and equipment malfunctions began plaguing Greekani interests throughout the galaxy, but the pattern was too subtle for their linear thinking to recognize. 3 months after the New Horizon massacre, Admiral Kane himself arrived at Council Station aboard a diplomatic transport. His presence was explained as a routine inspection of humanity's growing representation in galactic affairs. The Council welcomed him with the same polite condescension they showed all human officials. Kane was not like the other humans they had met. Where Thane was diplomatic and Foster was scholarly, the Admiral carried himself with the quiet confidence of a predator that had never met an equal. His pale eyes seemed to catalog every detail of the station's layout, every weakness in its defenses, every opportunity for exploitation. During his formal presentation to the Council, Kane spoke about humanity's desire to contribute to galactic security. He offered human expertise in dangerous situations, noting that their Deathworld origins made them uniquely suited for missions that other species found too risky. "We understand that our reputation precedes us," Kane said with a slight smile. Deathworld species are often seen as violent and unpredictable. We prefer to think of ourselves as thorough problem solvers. War leader Krex laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Humans amuse me with their pretensions. Your people die so easily that we hardly needed weapons to eliminate them." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Kane's smile never wavered. But something changed in his eyes that made several council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. "You're absolutely right," Kane replied calmly. "Individual humans are quite fragile. But we've learned to compensate for that weakness through cooperation and planning. It served us well on our dangerous homeworld." The Admiral's visit lasted exactly 1 week. During that time, he attended cultural events, toured the station's facilities, and met with various diplomatic representatives. To all appearances, it was a standard goodwill mission designed to strengthen relations between humanity and the galactic community. What the Council didn't realize was that Kane had spent those 7 days conducting the most comprehensive intelligence operation in human history. Every conversation was recorded, every security protocol was analyzed, and every potential weakness was cataloged and shared with operatives throughout the galaxy. By the time the Admiral departed, humanity had a complete picture of galactic civilization's vulnerabilities. More importantly, they had confirmed their suspicions about the true nature of the Council's power structure. The galaxy was held together by fear, maintained through the threat of technological and economic punishment. But fear was a weapon that could cut both ways, and humanity had just learned how to turn it against those who had wielded it for so long. Reed watched Kane's transport disappear into hyperspace and then returned to his quarters to send a coded message to Earth. The reconnaissance phase was complete. Now the real work could begin. Across the galaxy, human operatives began moving into position. Scientists studying alien biology, engineers maintaining critical infrastructure, diplomats building relationships with minor species, and traders establishing supply networks. Each one was a piece of a vast puzzle that would soon spell doom for humanity's enemies. The quiet Deathworlders were no longer content to observe. The predators were awake, and they were hungry for justice. The first economic reports arrived during the Council's monthly trade review, buried in routine statistics that most delegates ignored. Shipping delays were up 17% across major trade routes. Equipment failures in mining operations had increased by 23%. 3 separate star systems reported power grid instabilities that defied explanation. Councillor Vex of the Nimari floated in his containment sphere, his gaseous form swirling with what his species expressed as mild concern. The problems were scattered across different sectors and affected multiple species, which suggested random mechanical failures rather than coordinated sabotage. Still, the pattern was troubling. "Perhaps we should investigate these incidents more thoroughly," Vex suggested during the session. "The frequency seems unusually high for normal system degradation." War Leader Krex dismissed the concern with a wave of his massive clawed hand. "Equipment breaks. Systems fail. This is the nature of technology. The weak species that build inferior machines should expect such problems." What none of them realized was that Commander Sarah Bell was sitting 3 levels below them in the station's maintenance sector, wearing the uniform of a junior technician and monitoring their conversation through carefully placed listening devices. Her team of 25 human specialists had spent the past 6 months infiltrating every critical system on Council Station. Belle was a veteran of the Urban Warfare Division, trained in the art of invisible destruction. Her specialty was making. Catastrophic failures look like accidents, and she was very good at her job. The targeting system she was currently installing in the station's defensive grid would remain dormant until activated, but when the time came, it would turn the Council's own weapons against them. Halfway across the galaxy, Dr. Lisa Park was making her own preparations on the Vorthak homeworld. As a visiting researcher studying crystalline biology, she had been welcomed into their most secure facilities and given access to their primary resonance chambers. The Vorthak were proud of their crystal cities and eager to share their achievements with curious aliens. They had no idea that Park was using her access to map every harmonic frequency that could shatter their civilization. The acoustic charges she was placing throughout their infrastructure were smaller than coins and virtually undetectable. When activated simultaneously, they would create a resonance cascade that would reduce their greatest cities to powder. The beauty of humanity's approach was its distributed nature. No single operative knew the complete plan, and each team worked independently to avoid detection. If one cell was discovered, the others could continue their missions without compromise. On the Grakani military world of Hive 7, maintenance worker Tom Walsh was having an excellent month. His supervisors praised his dedication and attention to detail as he worked on the automated defense platforms that protected their primary shipyard. Walsh smiled and thanked them for the recognition while quietly installing software backdoors that would give Earth complete control of their weapon systems. The irony was perfect. The Grakani had murdered 37 humans because they viewed them as inferior and expendable. Now one human janitor was about to gain the power to destroy their entire fleet with a few keystrokes. Similar operations were underway on dozens of worlds throughout the galaxy. Human operatives had infiltrated power grids, communication networks, water treatment facilities, and transportation systems. They worked as engineers, researchers, traders, and maintenance staff. The galaxy had welcomed them as harmless curiosities. From a primitive world, never suspecting that each new arrival was a weapon waiting to be activated. Foster continued her research at Council Station, though her focus had shifted from basic xenobiology to something far more sinister. The biological weapons she was developing would target specific genetic markers unique to each alien species. A single aerosol deployment could eliminate every Grakani in a city while leaving other species completely unharmed. The worst part was how easy it had been. Galactic species had grown complacent in their superiority, sharing their biological data freely with human researchers who claimed to be studying evolutionary differences. They handed over the keys to their own extinction, while congratulating themselves on their scientific openness. Reed watched the daily intelligence reports with growing satisfaction. Every major species in the galaxy was now vulnerable to human attack. Critical infrastructure had been compromised, biological weapons were in position, and key military installations had been neutralized. The preparation phase was nearly complete. Timing of the final phase would be crucial. Humanity needed to move against all their targets simultaneously to prevent any species from warning the others. Coordination across hundreds of light years would require precise timing and flawless execution. President Torres called the operation Broken Covenant, named for the galaxy's failure to provide justice for the New Horizon massacre. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Demonstrate humanity's capabilities without actually committing genocide, then offer the galaxy a choice between cooperation and extinction. The demonstration began on a Tuesday, exactly 1 year after the first human delegation had arrived at Council Station. It started small, with power fluctuations in the Vorthak industrial sector and communication glitches in Grakani space. Most species attributed these problems to the ongoing technical difficulties that had been plaguing the galaxy for months. Then the failures began cascading. Mining equipment throughout Vorthak space began resonating at frequencies that cracked their crystal structures. Grakani hive ships found their navigation systems corrupted by viruses that turned their own computers against them. Nimari gas refineries experienced containment failures that vented their precious atmospheric gases into space. Within hours, every major species in the galaxy was experiencing catastrophic system failures that seemed to target their most critical vulnerabilities. The Vorthak couldn't understand why their crystal technology was destroying itself. The Grakani couldn't comprehend how their secure military networks had been compromised. The Nimari were baffled by the simultaneous failure of systems that had been maintained by different companies on different worlds. Foster smiled as she monitored the chaos from her laboratory. The alien species were reacting exactly as human psychologists had predicted. Faced with coordinated attacks on their infrastructure, they were looking for external enemies rather than recognizing the threat that had been living among them for months. Emergency sessions were called throughout the galaxy as planetary governments struggled to understand what was happening to their civilizations. Military leaders demanded immediate action against unknown attackers. Scientists frantically analyzed the failures looking for common causes that didn't exist. The council station was in chaos as representatives from every major species demanded answers and assistance. Councillor Roth's crystalline form was resonating, with stress harmonics that made the translation system stutter. War leader Krex was clicking his mandibles in rapid patterns that indicated extreme agitation. Even the normally calm Nimari were swirling with colors that suggested panic. Through it all, the human delegation sat quietly in the observer section, taking careful notes and asking thoughtful questions about the crisis. Ambassador Thane expressed appropriate concern for the galaxy's troubles and offered humanity's assistance in investigating the mysterious failures. Reed almost laughed at the absurdity of it. The galaxy's leaders were asking their victims to help solve the mystery of their own destruction. The predators had been living among the prey for so long that the prey had forgotten they were in danger. As reports flooded in from across the galaxy, one fact became undeniably clear. Every species was vulnerable except humanity. Human installations and ships were functioning normally while alien technology failed around them. The pattern was too obvious to ignore, but the implications were too terrifying to accept. The galaxy was about to learn that the quiet species from the dangerous world was far more dangerous than the world that had created them. The noose had been tied, and humanity was ready to tighten it around the throat of galactic civilization. The screens flickered to life across the galaxy at precisely 1430 Galactic Standard Time. Every communication device, every information display, every electronic billboard on every world controlled by Council species suddenly displayed the same image. Ambassador Thane sat calmly in what appeared to be a simple conference room, his hands folded peacefully on the table before him. But this was not the polite diplomat the galaxy had grown accustomed to. His eyes held a coldness that seemed to cut through the screen, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who held absolute power. "Citizens of the galaxy," Thane began. His words translated instantly into every known language. "For the past 18 months, you have experienced what your leaders dismissed as random system failures and unfortunate accidents. Today, I am here to inform you that nothing has been random, and none of it has been accidental. On Vorthak Prime, Councillor Roth's crystalline form began resonating with frequencies of pure terror. The implications of Thane's words were impossible to accept, yet the evidence was undeniable. Every screen in his crystal palace displayed the human's calm face, speaking words that would reshape galactic civilization. Every power grid failure, every industrial accident, every mysterious malfunction has been the result of careful planning and precise execution by human operatives. We have been living among you, working alongside you, learning your weaknesses while you dismissed us as harmless primitives from a backwater world." The broadcast switched to security footage from dozens of facilities across the galaxy. Human. technicians installing devices in power stations, human researchers collecting biological samples in secure laboratories, human diplomats having quiet conversations with minor species representatives who had grown tired of council domination. War leader Krex watched in growing horror as the screens showed human maintenance workers in the heart of his military installations, calmly placing explosives while Grakani guards stood nearby, completely unaware of the danger. The security systems that should have detected the intruders had been compromised from the inside by the very people the Grakani had trusted to maintain them. The species of this galaxy murdered 37 of our people, Thane continued, his voice never losing its calm, measured tone. Your council offered us money in exchange for their lives and told us to be more grateful for the honor of your attention. That decision was a mistake that will echo through history. President Torres appeared on the screen beside Thane, her presence adding the weight of Earth's full authority to the revelation. Unlike the ambassador's diplomatic calm, Torres radiated the controlled fury of a leader who had been pushed beyond all reasonable limits. We could have chosen extinction, Torres stated simply. The biological weapons we have developed and deployed could eliminate every member of the major council species within hours. The infrastructure damage we have prepared could collapse your civilizations and leave your worlds uninhabitable. We have the power to commit genocide on a galactic scale. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Across the galaxy, military leaders frantically tried to contact their forces, only to discover that communication networks were either down or completely under human control. The prey had realized they were trapped, but the cage had been built so carefully that escape was impossible. But we choose a different path, Torres continued. We choose to demonstrate our capabilities rather than use them to their fullest extent. Consider this your only warning. The demonstration began immediately. On Grakani Prime, their primary military command center simply went dark. Every screen, every computer, every communication device shut down simultaneously. The facility's massive power core continued running, but none of its energy reached the systems that controlled their planetary defenses. Tom Walsh sat in the maintenance tunnels beneath the base, monitoring the shutdown from a handheld device. With a few keystrokes, he could restore power to the facility or ensure that it never functioned again. The choice now belonged to his superiors on Earth, not to the Grakani who thought they controlled their own world. Similar demonstrations were occurring throughout Grakani space. Shipyards went offline, leaving half-constructed warships floating helplessly in their construction bays. Orbital platforms designed to protect their colonies found their weapons systems corrupted by viruses that had been dormant in their computers for months. The Vorthak homeworld experienced its own terrifying revelation as Dr. Park activated the harmonic charges she had spent months placing throughout their crystal cities. The resonance began low, barely perceptible to most species, but devastating to crystalline structures. Buildings began developing hairline cracks that spread like spiderwebs through their transparent walls. The resonance stopped just as suddenly as it had begun, leaving the Vorthak staring at cities that could have been reduced to powder if the humans had chosen to continue their demonstration. The message was clear. Your greatest achievements exist only because we allow them to exist. On dozens of Namari worlds, atmospheric processors began venting their precious gases into space before shutting down entirely. The species that required carefully controlled gas mixtures to survive watched their life support systems fail, knowing that only human intervention could restore them. Admiral Kane appeared on the screens next, his pale eyes reflecting the cold calculation of a military strategist who had never lost a war. Behind him, holographic displays showed the real-time status of every major military installation in the galaxy. Red indicators marked systems that were completely under human control. Yellow showed facilities that were compromised but still functional. Green indicated the few installations that remained untouched. There was far more red than green. Your military leaders are undoubtedly attempting to assess their defensive capabilities, Kane stated matter-of-factly. Allow me to save you the trouble. We control 73% of your major military installations, 86% of your communication networks, and 92% of your critical infrastructure. Any attempt at retaliation will result in the immediate shutdown of the systems you depend on for survival. The scope of human infiltration was staggering. Species that had considered themselves masters of the galaxy discovered that they were utterly dependent on the goodwill of the primitives they had dismissed. The Grekani, who prided themselves on military superiority, couldn't launch a single ship without human permission. The Vorthak, whose crystal technology was the envy of the galaxy, found their cities vulnerable to collapse at the touch of a button. Commander Bell activated her demonstration from deep within Council Station itself. The station's mighty defensive grid, designed to protect the seat of galactic government from any conceivable threat, began targeting empty space around the structure. Massive energy beams lanced out in carefully choreographed patterns, spelling out words in the vacuum. Humanity remembers. The council members who had gathered for an emergency session watched in speechless terror as their own weapons danced to human commands. If Bell chose to retarget those beams, she could reduce the station to debris in minutes. Every delegate, every staff member, every visitor to the station existed only because a human technician decided to let them live. We want you to understand something very important, Torres continued as the demonstrations reached their climax. This is not about conquest or dominion. This is about justice and respect. You created this situation when you decided that human lives were worthless and human dignity was negotiable. Foster appeared on screen from her laboratory, surrounded by sealed containers that held the biological weapons capable of ending entire species. Her voice was calm and scientific as she explained the contents of each vial, the delivery methods that had been prepared, and the projected casualty rates if the weapons were ever deployed. Every major population center in Council space has been exposed to dormant biological agents, she explained, with the same tone she might use to discuss weather patterns. These agents are completely harmless in their current state, but they can be activated remotely to target specific genetic markers. We could eliminate any species we choose while leaving their neighbors completely unharmed. The galaxy listened in stunned silence as the full extent of human preparation was revealed. This was not the work of months or even years. This was a coordinated infiltration that had begun the moment humans entered galactic society. Every friendly gesture, every cultural exchange, every diplomatic mission had been part of a vast intelligence-gathering operation. Reed stepped forward to deliver the final message, his expression showing none of the satisfaction he felt at seeing the galaxy's arrogance finally shattered. Your leaders will now be faced with a choice. You can continue as you have, treating smaller species as expendable resources and maintaining order through fear and intimidation. If you choose that path, you will discover what it means to be truly afraid. The screens displayed a new image. A map of the galaxy showing human infiltration networks that stretched across thousands of light years. Red lines connected human operatives to critical installations, creating a web of control that encompassed virtually every aspect of galactic civilization. Or, Reed continued, you can choose to build something better, a galactic community based on genuine cooperation rather than enforced submission, a society where justice is not determined by economic value and where the lives of all sentient beings have meaning. Torres reappeared to deliver the ultimatum that would define the galaxy's future. You have 72 hours to begin implementing meaningful reforms to your governmental structure. Species representation must be based on population and development, not military power. Criminal acts against any member species must be prosecuted fully, regardless of the perpetrator's political connections. Most importantly, the casual dismissal of entire civilizations as expendable must end. The transmission began to fade as Thane returned to deliver the closing message. We learned a phrase during our species' darkest period, never again. It meant that we would never again allow innocents to be slaughtered while others stood by and offered credits in compensation. Today, we extend that protection to the entire galaxy. The screens went dark across thousands of worlds, leaving billions of beings to contemplate a new reality. The quiet species from the dangerous world had revealed themselves to be the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. But unlike the Council's rule of fear, humanity offered a choice: evolve or face extinction. The age of galactic arrogance was over. The era of human oversight had begun. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in a chamber that felt more like a tomb than a seat of power. 71 hours had passed since humanity's revelation, and the deadline was approaching, with the inevitability of a stellar collapse. The delegates who had once commanded the respect and fear of 1,000 worlds now huddled together like prey animals, knowing that their every word was being monitored by human operatives. War Leader Krex entered the chamber with his usual swagger, but the effect was spoiled by the knowledge that human technicians could disable his life support systems with a single command. His mandibles clicked with barely controlled rage as he addressed the assembly. "This is intolerable," he declared, his voice echoing through the nearly empty chamber. "We cannot allow ourselves to be dictated to by a species that learned to fly. Between stars less than a century ago, I say we call their bluff and show them what real military power looks like." The silence that followed was broken only by the nervous flutter of Nimari gas forms and the subtle harmonic stress patterns emanating from the Vorthak delegates. Finally, Counselor Vex spoke from his containment sphere, his voice carrying the weight of inevitable defeat. "And how exactly do you propose we demonstrate this power, War Leader? Our ships cannot launch without human permission. Our weapons cannot fire without human codes. Our planets cannot maintain life support without human cooperation. We are not calling anyone's bluff. We are negotiating the terms of our survival." Admiral Kane chose that moment to make his entrance, walking through the chamber's main doors. With the casual confidence of someone visiting his own property, he was accompanied by a small team of human officials, each carrying data tablets that contained the redesigned governmental structure humanity expected the Council to implement. "Gentlemen," Kane said, settling into a chair that materialized from the floor at his gesture. The chamber's systems recognized his authority and responded accordingly, a small demonstration that made several delegates flinch visibly. "I hope you've given serious consideration to our proposal." The Admiral's presence was a calculated insult. Council sessions were traditionally restricted to elected representatives of member species, yet here was a human military officer treating their most sacred chamber like his personal office. The fact that nobody could stop him only emphasized how completely their authority had been transferred. President Torres appeared on the chamber's main display, broadcasting from Earth's capital. Behind her, the blue and green of humanity's dangerous homeworld served as a reminder of what had forged the species now reshaping galactic civilization. "I'm disappointed to hear that some of you still believe this is a negotiation," Torres said, her voice carrying across the chamber with absolute authority. "Let me clarify the situation. This is not a discussion between equals. This is a conquered government being offered terms by its new administrators." War Leader Krex rose from his seat, his massive form towering over the other delegates. "Conquered? We have not been conquered. We have been subjected to terrorism and extortion. The moment we discover your weaknesses, human, the moment we find a way to strike back, your species will learn what happens to those who threaten the Grakani Empire." Kane smiled at the war leader's outburst, an expression that held no warmth whatsoever. I was hoping someone would say that. It gives me the opportunity to provide a more comprehensive demonstration of our capabilities. The Admiral touched his data tablet, and every screen in the chamber displayed the real-time feeds from Grakani military installations throughout their territory. Massive shipyards that had been the pride of their civilization showed nothing but empty construction bays. The ships that should have been docked for maintenance or refitting were simply gone. Your entire battle fleet is currently under the control of human pilots, Kane explained conversationally. We transported skeleton crews aboard each vessel during the night cycle and assumed command of your ships using the access codes we installed months ago. Your crews are unharmed and confined to quarters, but they are no longer in command of their own vessels. The feed switched to show Grakani warships arranged in perfect formation around their homeworld, their weapons trained not on external threats, but on the planet's surface. The ships that had been built to project Grakani power across the galaxy were now pointed at the heart of their own civilization. War Leader Krex, Kane continued, I want you to understand something very important. We didn't conquer you through superior technology or overwhelming force. We conquered you through patience, planning, and the simple fact that you never considered us a threat worth watching. Your empire fell because you were too arrogant to guard against janitors and maintenance workers. The war leader's compound eyes fixed on Kane with an intensity that would have terrified any other species. But the human admiral simply returned, the gaze with calm indifference, completely unimpressed by the display of Grakani aggression. Your people killed 37 of our civilians, Kane said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried throughout the chamber. In response, we have taken control of your entire civilization without killing a single one of yours. I want you to think very carefully about what that says regarding our respective approaches to conflict resolution. Commander Bell's voice echoed through the chamber's communication system, transmitted from her position in the station's command center. Admiral, I'm reading energy buildups in the war leader's personal guard ships. It appears they're attempting to power up weapons. Systems. Kane nodded thoughtfully. Shut them down, Commander. All of them. Life support to minimal levels. Throughout the chamber, delegates watched their personal communicators display feeds from their own escort vessels. Grakani guards frantically pressed buttons and pulled levers as their ships lost power system by system. Within minutes, the proud warriors who had accompanied their war leader to Council Station were sitting in darkened ships, dependent on emergency oxygen supplies and the goodwill of human technicians for their survival. This is the reality of your situation, Kane explained, as the war leader slowly sank back into his seat. Every aspect of your civilizations is now under human oversight. We can restore your capabilities and allow you to continue governing your own worlds, but only if you demonstrate that you've learned from this experience. Dr. Foster appeared on the screens, broadcasting from her laboratory on Council Station. Behind her, the biological weapons that could end entire species sat in, their containment units like bottled apocalypse. The Vorthak homeworld currently has an atmospheric dispersal system loaded with species-specific toxins, she announced with scientific detachment. The Nimari colonies are equipped with gas composition modulators that could render their atmospheres unbreathable within hours. The Grakani population centers have been exposed to dormant viral agents that await activation. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop as the delegates contemplated their complete vulnerability. Foster continued her clinical assessment of their doom with the same tone she might use to discuss weather patterns. These systems will remain in place permanently. Consider them a form of insurance against future aggression. Should any species choose to return to the old ways of casual violence and exploitation, the consequences will be swift and final. Torres reappeared on the main display, her expression showing the weariness of a leader who had been forced to make impossible decisions. We didn't want this responsibility. We would have preferred to join your community as equals and contribute to galactic civilization through cooperation and mutual respect. You made that impossible when you decided our lives were worthless. The reformed Galactic Charter was transmitted to every delegate's personal system simultaneously. The document outlined a new governmental structure based on population representation, rather than military power. Criminal justice would be administered by independent tribunals with representatives from all member species. Most importantly, the casual dismissal of entire civilizations as expendable would be classified as a crime against sentience, punishable by immediate intervention from Earth's Enforcement Division. You have 12 hours to ratify these changes, Torres announced. Any delegation that refuses to sign will find their homeworld isolated from galactic society until their government is replaced by leaders who understand the new reality. Ambassador Thane made his final appearance of the day, broadcasting from Earth's orbital diplomatic facility. Behind him, the planet that had been dismissed as a primitive backwater glowed with the lights of a civilization that had just reshaped the galaxy through sheer determination. To the citizens of the galaxy watching these proceedings, I want you to understand what has happened here today. Your leaders failed you. They created a system based on fear and maintained it through violence and intimidation. When that system turned its attention to humanity, we responded with overwhelming force tempered by remarkable restraint. The ambassador's words carried the weight of absolute authority, but also something else, genuine hope for a better future. We offer you something your previous leaders never could. Genuine security. Not the false peace of enforced submission, but the real stability that comes from justice and mutual respect. The age of galactic bullying is over. The era of enforced cooperation has begun. The vote was unanimous. Every delegation signed the reformed charter, knowing that refusal meant the extinction of their species. But as the documents were processed and the new governmental structure took effect, something unexpected happened. Minor species that had been ignored for centuries began sending delegations to Council Station. Worlds that had been exploited by the major powers started asserting their rights under the new charter. The galaxy's downtrodden masses realized that the humans who had conquered their oppressors were now offering them protection and representation. Within weeks, humanity found themselves governing not just the former council powers, but a rapidly expanding alliance of species who had never been allowed to participate in galactic affairs. The quiet deathworlders had become the galaxy's reluctant but absolute rulers. President Torres addressed the new Galactic Assembly from her office on Earth, her words broadcast to thousands of worlds that were now learning what it meant to live under human protection. We learned the phrase, "never again," during our species' darkest hour. It meant that we would never again allow innocent people to suffer while those with power stood by and did nothing. Today, we extend that promise to every sentient being in the galaxy. Never again will the strong prey upon the weak. Never again will justice be for sale. Never again will any species face extinction while others offer credits in compensation. The galaxy had learned to fear the quiet ones, but more importantly, they had learned that sometimes the most dangerous predators were also the most principled protectors. Humanity had conquered the stars not through conquest, but through the simple understanding that some things were worth fighting for, and some promises were worth keeping no matter the cost. The age of human oversight had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.